When I bought my house, I thought I was investing in peace and security. The property was perfect, quaint cul-de-sac, freshly painted siding, low-maintenance yard, and a welcoming little neighborhood with a pond and hiking trails just down the street. The kind of place you'd imagine kids riding bikes, barbecues on weekends, and neighbors waving from their porches. What I didn't know was that this paradise came with its own tyrant, Karen, the president of the Homeowners Association. I'd heard the term HOA before, usually followed by complaints. But my real estate agent brushed off any concerns. They keep the neighborhood clean and organized, she had smiled, waving off the packet of rules like it was an IKEA instruction manual. I didn't know at the time that I was stepping into a suburban dictatorship. At first, it was subtle. A note tucked in my mailbox the day after I moved in. Trash cans must be brought in within 1 hour of pickup, per HOA guidelines. Okay, fair. Maybe I'd left it out too long. Then a week later, another slip of paper. Your grass exceeds 2.5 inches. Please mow by end of day. Slightly more annoying, but still manageable. But things took a turn when I decided to host a small backyard fire pit evening with a few friends. We weren't rowdy, just roasting marshmallows, sipping cider, and chatting. It ended by 10 p.m. The next morning, Karen showed up on my porch. She didn't knock. She stood, hands on hips, as I opened the door with a half-eaten granola bar in my hand. "Good morning," I said. Her lips curled into a tight smile. "I'm here to remind you that Section 4B of the HOA covenant prohibits open flames after dusk. You could have caused a hazard to the community. Is that really in the rules?" I asked, dumbfounded. Karen pulled out a laminated booklet from her bag, like she was an officer quoting penal code. "Right here," she said, tapping it. "And in addition, quiet hours start at 8 p.m. We expect everyone to be indoors, or at least not disturbing others." "Wait, indoors?" I blinked. "That's not the same as quiet hours. You're saying we can't be outside after 8 p.m.? "It's part of our community's safety standards," she said, smugly. "People walking around late at night can invite crime. Loitering, trespassing, or worse." "But it's my yard," I said. She folded her arms. "Everyone signed the same agreement when they bought in." That was the first time I realized this wasn't just a strict HOA. This was her kingdom. And the 8 p.m. rule wasn't a suggestion. It was enforced like curfew in a dystopian novel. At first, I tried to laugh it off. My neighbors seemed nice enough. One couple next door, Mark and Lynn, had lived there for 6 years. They always waved but seemed cautious about talking too long. Another neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Holloway, would only whisper when he spoke about the HOA. "Keep your head down," he told me once. "They watch everything." I wasn't sure what they meant at first, until I noticed the cameras. Tiny ones, mounted on poles or peeking out from hedges. The HOA claimed they were for security, but they were always pointed toward driveways, porches, backyards, never at the street. Then came the fines. First was $50 for a visible garbage bin, then $100 for unauthorized lighting, a set of solar lanterns I'd put along my walkway. The most absurd one was $200 for non-regulation Halloween decor. I had a foam skeleton on my lawn. Apparently, it was too gruesome. Each time, I challenged the fines. Each time, I was ignored or told that Karen had final say. When I finally emailed the HOA board asking to appeal, I got a form reply. All HOA-related inquiries must go through the president. That's when I started digging. Turns out, Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was the HOA. The rest of the board was made up of her friends, mostly retired or stay-at-home types who rarely attended meetings but always voted in line with her. The annual election was never announced publicly. When I asked for minutes from the last meeting, they told me the documents were confidential. The final straw came one Friday night. I had just gotten back from work late. Exhausted and hungry, I ran outside of my car around 8:30 p.m. to grab some takeout I'd forgotten in the back seat. The moment I stepped off the porch, I heard it, a metallic clink and then a sharp voice. "Excuse me." I turned to see Karen standing across the street, flashlight in hand like a rent-a-cop. "It's after 8, she snapped. "You need to be inside." "I'm just grabbing food from my car," I said, holding up the paper bag. "Doesn't matter," she said. "You're violating Section 8A. That's a $150 fine." I laughed, not even hiding it anymore. Are you serious? She marched over, clipboard in hand. I take safety very seriously. You can laugh now, but when something happens, don't say, I didn't warn you. You do realize I'm a grown adult on my own property, right? I asked. That property is governed by our HOA, she said, clicking her pen. And you agreed to abide by the rules. The next morning, I got an email from the HOA with the subject line, Violation Notice, After Hours Activity. Attached was a grainy screenshot of me at my car, taken from one of the pole-mounted cameras. It wasn't just intrusive. It was creepy. That weekend, I tried to rally a few neighbors. I knocked on a few doors, careful to be polite. Mark and Lynn looked uncomfortable. We don't want to get involved, Lynn whispered. We have kids. Mr. Holloway didn't answer, but I saw the curtain twitch. Another neighbor, a single mom named Tricia, admitted she'd been fined multiple times and even threatened with legal action when she tried to dispute it. This place wasn't like this before, she told me. But Karen took over during COVID. No one voted. She just declared herself in charge. I decided to check the public records. Sure enough, the HOA was registered as a nonprofit corporation, but the last election filing was 3 years old. Karen had listed herself as president, treasurer, and a secretary. It was a one-woman regime. So I pushed back. I sent a cease and desist email citing harassment and unauthorized surveillance. I CC'd a lawyer friend, hoping the legal language would spook her. Her response? A hand-delivered notice citing rule violations and an invitation to a mandatory disciplinary hearing. Mandatory. The hearing was held in her living room. She sat at the head of the table like Judge Judy, flanked by 2 board members who looked half asleep. I recorded the whole thing on my phone. You've been found in repeated violation of HOA quiet hour policy, she intoned. You've also attempted to undermine the authority of this board. Undermine? I asked. By asking questions? She narrowed her eyes. You're being disruptive. I leaned forward. Karen, you're abusing your position. These rules aren't legal, and your surveillance is probably criminal. I'm not the only one who sees it. Oh, trust me, she said coolly. You're the only one who's going to cause problems. That line stuck with me. Over the next few days, I noticed strange things. My mailbox was opened, but nothing stolen. My trash cans were turned sideways. One morning, my backyard gate was ajar, and I know I locked it. Subtle, unnerving messages. I told myself it was paranoia. Until the night, I heard footsteps outside my window after 10 p.m. I peeked through the blinds and saw 2 figures in HOA windbreakers standing in my yard with flashlights. I opened the door and shouted at them, but they vanished around the side. I called the non-emergency police line. They took a report, shrugged it off. But that was the last straw. That's when I decided to go outside after 8 p.m. again, on purpose. Not to cause trouble, not to rebel, but to live. I wasn't about to be bullied on my own property. I just didn't expect what would happen next. The night I went out after 8 p.m. was a statement. I wasn't trying to antagonize anyone. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't throwing a party. I wasn't breaking any laws. I just walked outside to breathe. I had dinner, put on a hoodie, and stepped onto my back porch with a cup of tea, phone in one hand, flashlight in the other, and my mind prepared for anything. It was 8:17 p.m. I waited for the world to explode. At first, nothing happened. The air was crisp, a gentle breeze rattling the hedges. A dog barked in the distance. Porch lights flickered across the cul-de-sac, but most houses were dark or drawn shut. I walked around to my driveway, mostly just to stretch my legs, and stood near my car. I could feel the cameras turning. I didn't care. I stared straight at them and raised my mug in mock salute. That's when I noticed it. Movement across the street. 2 silhouettes standing behind a tree. I couldn't make out faces, but one was short and squat, the other tall and thin. Their postures screamed tension. Watching, I went back toward my front door, casually. Didn't want to give them the satisfaction. I stepped inside, locked the door, and peered through the blinds. Nothing. They were gone. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Just as I was thinking I might have dodged whatever trap Karen had planned, a sharp knock jolted me. Not a polite knock. This was heavy, aggressive, fist on wood. I opened the door an inch, The chain still latched. Karen stood there, flanked by two men in matching blue HOA jackets. One of them clearly the tall guy I saw earlier. She didn't even try to pretend anymore. She looked furious but calm. A smug calm, like she was about to handle me. "You are in violation of HOA community safety regulations," she said, pulling out her ever-present clipboard. I didn't respond, just stared. "You were observed loitering outside your property at 8:17 p.m., she continued. "This is your final warning before formal action is taken." "Loitering?" I asked, stepping into the light. "On my own driveway." "You're disturbing the peace," she said flatly. "I was drinking tea." "That doesn't matter." I took a breath. "I'm not going to argue with you. I have rights, and none of your made-up rules override state law." Karen smirked. "You agreed to those rules when you bought this house." I unlocked the chain and stepped outside, now within full view of the men. "Then sue me. But unless you have a court order, get off my property." One of the men, bearded, thick-set, probably early 50s, took a step forward. "We're allowed to perform safety inspections," he said gruffly. "Try me," I said. "You step 1 foot on this porch, I'll charge you with trespassing." That's when the second man, the taller one, moved fast. He lunged for my phone. It happened so quickly that I barely reacted in time. I jerked back, and his hand missed by an inch, grazing the phone out of my grip. It clattered onto the porch. He dove for it, but I kicked it back inside, slamming the door behind me and locking both deadbolts. "You just assaulted me," I yelled through the door. Karen's voice oozed through the crack. "We're calling the police for obstruction and threatening behavior." "Go ahead," I shouted. "I'm calling them too." I didn't even hesitate. I dialed 911 immediately. "911, what's your emergency?" "I'm being harassed and physically attacked by members of my HOA. One of them tried to grab my phone. They're on my porch." The dispatcher was calm, professional. "Are you safe inside?" "Yes." "The door's locked. They haven't left yet. We're dispatching officers now. Stay on the line." From the window, I saw Karen and the men pacing. The taller guy looked antsy now, glancing at the street. Karen was still trying to save face, but you could tell she wasn't expecting me to call her bluff. She wasn't used to people fighting back. "Officers are 2 minutes out," the dispatcher said. And then, as if perfectly timed, flashing lights crested the cul-de-sac. 2 patrol cars pulled in, bathing the street in red and blue. Karen immediately walked up to them, trying to get ahead of the story. I saw her gesturing wildly as the officers exited, hands on belts, listening but not convinced. I stepped outside with my phone in hand, still recording. One officer turned to me. "You the caller?" I nodded. "They tried to break into my house and steal my phone." Karen interrupted. "That's not true. He was threatening us, violating HOA curfew rules. We were documenting it, and he became violent." The shorter officer frowned. "Curfew." She held up her clipboard like it meant something. "HOA policy. No outdoor activity after 8 p.m. The officers exchanged glances. One of them took a step closer to her. "Ma'am, HOA rules don't override state or federal law. You can't enforce curfews unless it's legally sanctioned. This isn't a gated community. That's not legal." Karen's mouth hung open. The taller HOA enforcer started walking away casually toward his truck. "We're done here." "Not so fast," the officer barked. "I need everyone to stay put while we take statements." It was surreal watching Karen deflate. The clipboard trembled in her hands. Her face had gone from smug to pale. I gave a detailed statement to one officer, and when I offered them the recording on my phone, they took it as evidence. "Attempted phone theft, potential assault, trespassing. These are serious," the officer said. "We'll file a full report. You may want to consider pressing charges." "Yes," I said without hesitation. Karen started yelling. "This is an abuse of power. He's harassing me. This is my neighborhood." The officer calmly turned to her. "Ma'am, you're free to consult a lawyer, but you have no authority to physically engage with residents over HOA policy. If you confront him again, you will be charged with harassment." Eventually, after more questions, the HOA thugs were told to leave. Karen stormed off with the bearded man, muttering something about a lawsuit. The taller man didn't speak. He just glared at me like he wanted to say something, but didn't. The officers remained for a few minutes longer, ensuring I felt safe. I gave him a copy of the footage, and they promised to follow up within the week. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, the story had already started to spread. Someone had filmed the flashing lights and posted it on our neighborhood Facebook group. Comments piled up. Is that a Karen's house? I knew something was off with the HOA. Who else got a weird curfew notice this month? This guy deserves a medal. Karen didn't post a thing. Neither did any of the board members. But that day, an anonymous envelope arrived on my porch. No return address. Inside were photocopies, screenshots of internal HOA emails. Karen writing things like, "We need to tighten surveillance on Lot 14. He's becoming a problem. Tell Dave to patrol more aggressively. A scare tactic might work. If we push hard enough, he'll either comply or leave. We need compliance." I stared at the pages in disbelief. Someone on the inside was helping me. I posted the redacted versions of the screenshots online, tagging the HOA group and our neighborhood forum. I left out names, but the implications were clear. The post exploded. Neighbors began messaging me privately. They shared stories, being fined for walking their dogs too late, being followed by Karen on their morning jogs, having security cameras pointed directly at their windows. One woman even admitted Karen threatened to report her to child services because her teenage son sat outside on the porch past 9 p.m. That was the breaking point. By that weekend, several households had coordinated a petition to demand a full audit of the HOA, removal of the current board, and a freeze on all fines and enforcement actions. We requested a legal review of Karen's surveillance setup and raised concerns to local media. And while all of that was gathering momentum, I received one more surprise. Karen left a note on my door. Written in all caps, bold marker. "You've made a very big mistake. This isn't over." I took a photo and sent it to the officer handling my case. "This definitely qualifies as harassment," he said. The attack may have started with flashlights and clipboards, but now it had become a war. Karen wasn't just enforcing made-up rules. She was trying to control people through fear. And I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. After the incident, things escalated faster than I could have imagined. The video footage, the police report, and the screenshots of Karen's emails weren't just whispers anymore. They were full-on fire alarms in a neighborhood that had been asleep far too long. Within 48 hours, the Facebook group had over 200 comments on my post. More people came forward. Stories tumbled out like secrets that had been held in for years. HOA fines for chalk drawings on sidewalks, for kids riding scooters too noisily. Even a woman who was fined $250 because her husband worked the night shift and came home after 10 p.m., apparently violating the quiet return clause Karen had cooked up and buried in a footnote of an unofficial addendum. By Monday, a local news crew reached out. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to become that guy on TV, but then I thought, if I don't speak up, who will? So I did the interview. I stood in front of my house, the same house Karen had tried to turn into a prison, and told the truth. I kept it respectful, but honest. I talked about the night of the attack, the fake curfew, the neighborhood fear, and the abuse of authority. The segment aired the next evening on the 6 o'clock news. HOA horror in the suburbs, the anchor called it. That night, my inbox blew up. Reporters, attorneys, activists, even some former HOA members from other towns saying they'd seen this behavior before. It always started with one person getting a little too much power. The next HOA meeting, normally a dull affair with 5 people and stale cookies, was packed wall to wall. It had been moved to the community center due to increased interest, which was putting it mildly. Over 60 residents showed up. Karen tried to take the floor early, claiming the microphone as board protocol. People booed. For the first time since I'd moved here, I saw her crack. Her voice wavered. She tried to spin it. The cameras were for our protection. The curfew was a suggestion. The clipboard incidents were misunderstood. But people weren't buying it anymore. I stood up and read the printouts of her emails. Another neighbor, Tricia, showed the violation photos Karen had emailed her at 2 a.m. Then Mr. Holloway raised his hand. Everyone went quiet. She put a camera facing my bedroom window, he said softly. I covered up. Next morning, She left me a letter warning me about tampering with HOA equipment. The room erupted. By the end of the meeting, a vote was called, not to discuss policy, but to remove Karen entirely. She refused, of course, citing some obscure bylaw that said only the board could vote on leadership. But the crowd wasn't interested in technicalities. Someone yelled, "Then we'll vote on the board." And that's exactly what we did. An emergency election was proposed for the following weekend. That night, I created a simple website for organizing, freetyneighborhood.com. Within hours, dozens of residents signed up to help. Flyers were printed. Yard signs went up. Vote out Karen. In the HOA reign, it was the most united this neighborhood had ever been, and, ironically, it was because of how divided Karen had tried to make it. Karen tried to retaliate in those last desperate days. New fines, new threats. She even filed a civil harassment claim against me and a few others. But it didn't go her way. Not only did the judge dismiss it, but our legal team filed a countersuit for harassment, stalking, and invasion of privacy. The camera facing Mr. Holloway's window was the tipping point for the judge. She ordered Karen to take down all private surveillance devices or face criminal charges. And then, finally, the weekend came. The emergency HOA election felt like a neighborhood holiday. Tents were set up. There were snacks, water coolers, even a guy with a guitar playing soft acoustic music while people lined up to vote. Each household had one vote, and paper ballots were counted by a third-party monitor, a local attorney who volunteered to oversee it. By noon, the turnout was over 80%. At 3 p.m., the results were announced. Karen had been voted out. So had the entire board. All 7 members were replaced with newly elected residents, people who had pledged transparency, fairness, and zero surveillance. When Karen heard the news, she didn't say a word. She walked briskly to her car and drove off. That was the last time I saw her in the neighborhood. But her departure didn't fix everything overnight. The new board began the long process of reversing Karen's policies. They halted all outstanding fines and voided every citation issued in the last 12 months. They brought in an IT expert to dismantle the surveillance system Karen had set up, every hidden camera, every storage drive, every wired motion sensor. Residents were invited to check the footage to see if they'd been recorded. Many were. One couple discovered Karen had been monitoring their hot tub. Meanwhile, our harassment countersuit gained momentum. Over a dozen neighbors joined as co-plaintiffs. The local news picked up the follow-up story. HOA power grab ends in lawsuit. Karen tried to disappear, but the court eventually ordered her to appear. She claimed everything was done for the safety of the neighborhood. The judge didn't agree. Karen was fined thousands of dollars in damages. She avoided jail, but only barely. Community service was assigned, and a restraining order was filed preventing her from participating in any HOA leadership for 5 years. The aftermath felt like a slow exhale. People started coming outside again. Sidewalk chalk returned. Barbecues resumed. Porch lights stayed on past 8 p.m. Kids played tag until sunset. I hosted a community fire pit night, the same thing that triggered Karen in the beginning, and more than 20 neighbors showed up. We laughed about the clipboard, the cameras, the wild power trip. It felt like freedom. Eventually, we amended the HOA charter. We added a clause that said, "No resident shall be restricted from the peaceful use of their own property unless in violation of city, state, or federal law." We also set term limits for board members and required public notification of all HOA meetings and votes. Transparency became the new standard. The neighborhood had learned its lesson. One day, months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single note. "You were right." I lost sight of the point. No name, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Karen's. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was gone. The community was awake. And I finally felt like I lived in a place where I could sit outside at night without fear of being watched, fined, or attacked with a clipboard. What started with an 8 p.m. curfew had turned into something far bigger, a rebellion, a movement, a neighborhood reclaiming its voice. And all it took was one night, one stand, and one video to change everything.